Hey folks, Kevin here. Well, it's May 6, 2021, and I've been real busy working with things out here. Haven't produced many videos in the last week. But today I wanted to respond to one of the questions from my brother Jim, who watched some of my videos. And he had asked about what fertilizer do I recommend. So I'm torn with fertilizers, to tell you the truth. Now, we're totally dependent on fertilizers for our indoor plants. Now, Thea is very much into our indoor plants, from orchids to a whole variety of different plants. And those plants are in a soilless mixture, meaning that it isn't soil that's been composted and nutrient rich with all the beautiful microorganisms. It's just like peat moss, perlite, bark, ground bark, and sphagnum. So there's many different organic materials there, but it doesn't come with microorganisms. Not that there are zero microorganisms in that area, but there isn't a microbial community, a microbiome that are the workers feeding the plants. That's unlike the situation in our permanent raised beds. And if you watch some of our large composting series that I've done in the past, and the bed creating the permanent raised beds, you see we use wood chips, we've used hay, and certainly the compost that's been thermophilically created. So we get it up to the right temperature, which kills off the pathogens. We selected materials that didn't have herbicides in them, and so that's what we use to build our permanent raised beds. In our food forest, we use more woody materials because we have a more fungally dominated soil. And I have posted videos in the past about soil, the sand, silt, and clay, the main components that we think of, those inorganic materials, or the stuff that comes from bedrock and it gets broken down into smaller and smaller particles. And then we've created videos talking about soil succession, going from a weedy environment like a lawn that has mostly bacterial dominated soil, and transferring that to microorganisms that can support a vegetable garden, and those that can support your apple trees, your fruit trees, and so on and so forth. So and that whole soil succession series is about the various bacteria, protozoa, fungi, viruses. We have all of these different kingdoms that are in the soil, that some are breaking down waste products, fecal material, environmental pollutants that are breaking down woody material and feeding the microorganisms, and then some microorganisms are feeding on other microorganisms, but those waste products from those microorganisms get fed through a network like the mycorrhizal fungi that feed the root system of the plant and provide all the nutrients. So the plant that you're planting, whether it's a tree or a tomato plant, that establishes a symbiotic, mutually beneficial relationship with the microorganisms in the soil that are there, and they work together to exchange nutrients. Through photosynthesis, the plants create these simple sugars, and they go down through the root system and feed the microorganisms, and those microorganisms then feed the various elements and other micronutrients to the plants. Now, when we're talking about fertilizers, often we'll see three different numbers on a fertilizer: NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and they come in in a different ratio depending on what you're actually growing and what your soil conditions are like. Now, I'm not a big fan of it. There's synthetic fertilizers that really are partially responsible for climate change. They're the ones that came from the war industrial processes, and so they have a whole set of different possibilities of causing harm to our environment. Even our organic fertilizers, it's not a silver bullet, and we use organic fertilizers inside our houseplants. But when we give the organic fertilizers, they are not necessarily adhered to the plant system itself. It goes through the system. It ends up in our water table. Those algae blooms that we worry about in various parts of the world, that's many of these fertilizers getting into the water. The phosphorus that's in the NPK, that's mined, and that causes destruction. Now the phosphorus can get into the water system and cause depletion of oxygen and massive kill-offs of not just the fish but many different amphibians as well. And those amphibians can actually be, the larvae can be responsible for killing off the larval stages of mosquitoes. And so we can have polluted water as a result of the indiscriminate and inappropriate use of even organic fertilizers. So if you're going to choose fertilizers, I'd say try to use the organic fertilizers. Use them sparingly. Know what your goals and aspirations are. Know how to interpret what's going on with the leaves on your plants as well, so that you're giving the right ratio and not excess amounts of the other components in the system. So non-point sources of pollution from agricultural runoff are responsible for, one of the lakes we have right near Fulton, New York, is completely polluted and it's unsafe to go swimming in. People haven't been able to go swimming in there. People still fish out of there. They shouldn't be. It's not good for their health. So all around the United States, we've created these regions which are really unsafe for people to utilize. As when I was a kid, it was we didn't have as many problems with the agricultural runoff that we have now. So I think that there are good fertilizers out there. I'm not that familiar with them. My wife knows the fertilizers that she uses for our indoor plants. I do use sparingly some fertilizer for our blueberry plants when we're first starting them off, but I'm not a fan of them. I'm always trying to create organically the soil materials that the microorganisms will flourish in, that will create a symbiotic relationship with the plants that I'm planting in the gardens. So, like one thing that people are using for their organic permanent raised beds, their small backyard gardens and all, they can pick up organic alfalfa pellets. So those would be used for feeding, a variety of different ruminants, rabbits and small pets and all. But trying to find locally the organic alfalfa pellets so that we're not getting the persistent herbicides in those as well, which will harm your gardens, can be a bit of a challenge. So organic alfalfa pellets probably would be a good thing. Otherwise, certainly using leaf mulch, composting, doing your own composting system as well. And once you've established the microbial community and you recognize the resources that it needs, it can just be once or twice a season adding the appropriate materials. So you don't want to take a lot of fresh grass clippings that are going to mold and introduce contaminants into the soil. But you can use a whole variety of different techniques, it's too big of a topic for this particular video. The other thing I would say is what Jim thought of as being a fertilizer are mycos. And so in that video on the potted plants versus the rooted plants, I added a link to mycorrhizal fungi. And so these are the spores spores for fungi are like seeds for plants. That's the reproductive units, and these spores can last for many, many years in under the right circumstances. So these spores, if in close proximity to the roots of many plants, and it's the vast majority of plants in the plant kingdom that respond. Unfortunately, some of the brassicas and some of our blueberry plants and our cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, beets, those sorts of plants aren't going to have a relationship with its mycorrhizal fungi. But the roots of the rest of the plants, most of the plants in plant kingdom, with a proper mixture of mycorrhizal spores, they'll create an attachment if in close proximity to the root hairs of a tree or plant that you're planting. They will extend the relative root extensiveness in the soil and create a network with the other soil microorganisms and plants in the environment, and thereby facilitating an exchange. Just like when the internet gets hooked up to your house, all of a sudden you can go and get information from the World Health Organization, you can get information from the community extensions, you can get information from your YouTube channel and so on. That internet is a network that's very similar in some shapes. It's like when you walk in the forest, when we walk through the forest, and you see that when it's during the summertime and there's a great big canopy of leaves and all, and so it's cooler in the forest during those hot days of the summer. And there's just not much light getting through to those small plants growing on the forest floor, those trees that are going to take over in the future. So those small trees are hooked up to the mycorrhizal fungi that are connecting between the trees. It can be a couple 100 feet away as long as they're canopy. So those trees are being nourished by, even though they're not able to get as much photosynthesis done, those simple sugars are coming from the trees in the upper canopy, going through the fungal network, and feeding those small trees on the ground floor of the forest. So there's this whole network of microorganisms, including fungi, which could be considered a macroorganism. But that's what I am always working on. I love the science related to the various microorganisms and the benefits that they do. Just like with our own bodies, I've made videos about our microbiome within our digestive system, in our armpits, in our nose, in our mouth, our ears, wherever it is. There's various microbial communities within each one of those environments. So by changing something in the environment, we can alter the microorganisms, whether it's the nutrients. The diet that we eat affects the number of microorganisms that are beneficial to us, and therefore we can absorb through our digestive system the nutrients that we need. Like one more thing, like our digestive system is, in a sense, from going from our oral cavity to our anus, it's just a very long, elaborate tube that goes through our body. So when we consume something, it doesn't get into us. It goes through our digestive system and through the digestive processes and most beneficially through the large intestine, the microorganisms that live in our digestive system. They facilitate, based on what food we're eating, what phytonutrients or nutrients, or whether it causes inflammation and separation of our intercellular adhesion molecules, our ICAMs, and that causing leaky gut syndrome, or if some of those benefits of eating the blueberries, the anthocyanins or currants, those phytonutrients become transported into our circulatory system. So if we're not used to eating a good diet, the food, the benefits of the food, the nutrients that are in the food are not bioavailable to us. They pass through our system. When we're adding some of the fertilizers to the soil, those fertilizers may only transiently be bioavailable to those plants, and within 2 days' time they may have gone. So it may be as little as 1% or 2% or 10% of the dose of the fertilizer that you're administering to the soil in your gardens. I'm not talking about in potted plants, have already moved on and working their way to the water table. We can get salt deposits from over fertilizing in our soil as well. There's and that can be toxic to the beneficial microorganisms that are in the soil as well. So this was probably much more than you wanted to hear, Jim, or anyone else wanted to hear, but I thought I'd just say a few things about my approach to feeding the plants and providing optimal nutrients available to the plants. I'm the outdoorsy person, he is more the indoorsy person when it comes to the potted plants. I'm more thinking about the microbial community in the soil, the microbial community just under the wood chips that I'm laying down as well, those sorts of things as well. So if you found this video valuable, please give us a thumbs up, share it with your friends. Don't be afraid to leave a comment, your thoughts and experiences and all, or any questions that you have. Take care, folks, and have a super fantastic day. Bye-bye now.